graduated in chemistry from University of Aveiro, Portugal, and she received Best Chemistry Student Award from Tau, and she was an assistant researcher at CSCO, Aveiro Institute of Materials Chemistry Department, from the University of Aveiro, Portugal, and since February 2014, she is a coordinator researcher at the same institute. Currently, Professor Friere is the coordinator of Group 5 of CSCO, Biomedical and Biomimetic Materials, and member of the Cooperation of Scientific Dissemination Committee of the Chemistry Department at University of Aveiro. Since 2017, she is the member of the Young Scientist Seminar of the Lisbon Academy of Science. And another her student, Sonia Pedro, is currently a biochemistry student. She is doing her PhD at Cisco in University of Aveiro, Portugal. So she has completed her bachelor's and her master's degree in biochemistry, both from the same institute. She has presented her work in several national and international conferences. So with this brief introduction, I would like to start. I will ask you to start this lecture. Hopefully, all the audience will be very much get benefited from this lecture. Thank you.
Okay, so I believe it is good afternoon. Thank you for the kind introduction to both of us. And we would like to thank the invitation and the possibility to present our work and congratulate you on trying to promote the better understanding of eutectic solvents and their many applications. This has been also our work in the recent years, and it's always a great joy that we share the results we achieved so far, especially me on this topic. So before I start, I would like to present our group. In the beautiful city of Aveiro, known as the Portuguese Venice, you can find the University of Aveiro. It is a unique campus that accounts with several research units and associated laboratories. We can find CISECO, the Aveiro Institute of Materials. This is one of the largest institutes on Portugal for the study of materials, sciences, and engineering. And within CISEC, we have our group, the Path Research Group. As you can see here, we are many. I believe that not all of us are in this photo, but we have dedicated our work to the study of novel solvents and the development of sustainable products and processes, with emphasis on the research on ionic liquids and more recently on the study and understanding of eutectic solvents and their applications. In my purpose, I use eutectic solvents for the more therapeutic purposes. And we saw an opportunity with eutectic solvents, mostly due to the drawbacks associated with the pharmaceutical industry. I think we can all agree that now more than ever, pharmaceuticals are essential to our life quality and life expectancy, but they still have problems associated with their administration. And this is mostly due to the fact that drugs in the market and under development, they are mostly fully water soluble. And that generally leads to low bioavailability and low permeation. And that's something we must avoid and attempt to improve. And rather than developing novel drugs that can be also fully water soluble, there's a clear advantage in improving the already existing drugs. So since the pharmaceutical industry mostly still relies on solid forms of drugs, the polymorphism phenomenon can be observed, which means you can have the active ingredients in different crystalline structures. So these polymorphs, they will have different solubility, different dissolution rates, and this will impact the overall bioavailability of the drug. Which is the therapeutic dosage for one polymorph. It can be toxic or potentially lethal if the wrong one is administered. And a good example of this happened with ritonavir. And ritonavir is antiretroviral drug used in the treatment of HIV. And back in 1996, it was commercialized by Abbott Laboratories as semi-solid capsules. And because ritonavir is not bioavailable, it required the use of ethanol water formulation to be dissolved. And what happened was that after 18 months in the market, it started to appear precipitated in the capsules. They were analyzed, and the second polymorph, the form 2, was found that was way less soluble. And the drug had to be removed from the market with losses in sales and research and development, and can only be relaunched many years later. So the message here is, while we're trying to develop an effective and safe formulation, solubility and stability should be our major concern. So to improve the solubility of drugs, several techniques have been reported in literature for polywater soluble ones, as the use of co-solvents like ethanol, glycerol, or polyethylene glycol, the use of micellar systems, oil in water microemulsions, the salt formation, as we have generally sodium-based salts of drugs, and within the physical modifications, we have solid dispersions. And solid dispersions are one of the most promising techniques to increase the bioavailability of the drug, because they reduce the particle size to its minimum, so they will increase the absorption of the active ingredients. And so within the solid dispersions, you can find eutectic mixtures. They have been fully studied and commercialized due to the fact they are very effective in increasing the drug's formulation. But from the last years in the study of eutectic systems, hypothetical solvents comprising active pharmaceutical ingredients, they have emerged as promising alternatives to these purposes, because they differ from eutectic mixtures due to the fact that their hydrogen bonds between the hydrogen bond donor and receptor are so strong that deviate the ideal thermodynamic phase behavior to such a degree that we can have a mixture that is liquid at room or body's temperature. And for pharmaceutical formulation purposes, this is very interesting, because we can have a liquid form of the drug, and that by that approach avoid complex polymorphism of drugs, while we are increasing its solubility in water. And one of these examples happens with aspirin, when combined with calcium chloride in 1:2 molar ratio, as you can see here. However, the number of active ingredients liquid by this process, it's still limited, mostly due to the fact that we have a lack of predictive models that can actually tell us which combinations will result in a liquid drug. And that's something that, fortunately, some of our colleagues in the group are at the moment trying to expand. And so, since we can have active pharmaceutical ingredients as hypothetical solvent components, they can be both hydrogen bond donors and acceptors depending on their structure. And based on what we have in literature, they can be divided in 4 main categories based on what is the second component. And the selection of the hypothetical solvent component will dictate if we have, in fact, a liquid form of the drug, but also the resulting therapeutic properties. And so these drugs can be combined with metabolite-derived compounds, such as calcium chloride, or permeation enhancers, if our purpose is to increase the permeation to biological membranes, if we want to improve transdermal delivery, or even have polymerizable character. If we combine the active ingredient with the polymerizable moiety, we can tune the drug release profile by this process to have a drug delivery system. And last, we can combine 2 active ingredients and have a dual function liquid form with dual therapeutic action, which from a pharmaceutical point of view is very interesting. So based on what has been achieved so far in this topic, we have decided to combine recently this in a review article where addresses not only the formation of this type of hypothetic solvents, but also their use in the development of drug delivery systems. And what we noticed is that hypothetic solvents can be used not only to improve the therapeutic efficacy of the drug, but also to improve their systemic absorption. And this can be very notable when we compare with what already exists in literature, which is the fact of the cream AMLA. AMLA stands for Eutectic Mixture of Local Anesthetics, was breakthrough in drug solubilization. It was the first eutectic mixture to be actually patented and commercialized, and is based on the eutectic mixture of lidocaine and prilocaine. It's topically applied. But due to the fact of using prilocaine in this mixture is associated with some side effects, so this boosted the search for novel eutectic mixtures that could actually replace the use of prilocaine in the mixture. And more recently, prilocaine has combined with ibuprofen for this purpose. And what was seen is that you can have faster and stronger therapeutic action by having this mixture, and not only to increase the systemic absorption of lidocaine, but both active ingredients by this purpose. And so this may seem easy to achieve because we only have a mixture of 2 active ingredients, but in fact, transdermal delivery can be quite a challenging area, not only because it's mostly restrained to the fact that the active ingredient properties such as lipophilicity and solubility can have a huge impact on this delivery system, but also the proper pharmacological features of the drug itself. And if we want to have a topical delivery for a local purpose, or transdermal delivery if we want to reach the systemic circulation, especially for transdermal delivery, due to the selective nature of the skin barrier, only a small pool of drugs can actually be administered and be relevant at pharmaceutical levels. And this happens for drugs like lidocaine that I was just speaking about, because lidocaine, it can target the reversible disruption of the skin barrier and allow the drug delivery, and not all of the active ingredients can do that. So if we consider the overall drug delivery system, what if we can change the active ingredients, we have to look for our formulation, because this will be very relevant for side effects like skin irritation, and based on the selection of the permeation enhancers, the physiological pH of the formulation, which should be as close as possible to the skin pH, but mostly due to the fact of what pharmaceutical solvent we will select for this purpose. And the selection of a proper solvent for the pharmaceutical formulations and their concentration is very relevant, because organic solvents like ethanol, methanol, or dimethyl sulfoxide are still used as solvents and co-solvents in pharmaceutical formulations. And even at very low levels, they still are human health hazards. And for example, the use of organic solvents like ethanol in topical application, it can contribute to skin dryness and skin irritation, and compromise the effective or the efficacy of the formulation. And even at residue levels, it can also induce transformations in active ingredients and jeopardize the physicochemical stability and quality of the dosage form. So in order to have more effective formulations, we will require the use of a solvent that can increase the solubility and the bioavailability, but does not require to be removed, that can assist the active ingredient and increase the therapeutic action. So to this purpose, hypothetic solvents have proven to be adequate solvents for drug solubilization, and they have to be highlighted over other techniques and even the use of co-solvents due to their solubility enhancements in several orders of magnitude, as it happens with ibuprofen, which is a very low water-soluble drug. And the solubility of many active ingredients has been enhanced by using the eutectic solvents, but the most promising results have been reported by antifungal drugs. And as you can see here, it is possible to increase the solubility of these both antifungal drugs by using choline chloride glycolic acid. But the solubility enhancements can be even more pronounced when we add a third component to our eutectic mixture, which is oxalic acid. But the use of oxalic acid in these formulations, it is a problem to the implementation of these solvents in the pharmaceutical field because of their toxicity profiles. So while we are addressing the eutectic solvents for this purpose, we have to carefully select the eutectic solvents components and always evaluate the cytotoxicity of our final formulations. So more than increasing the solubility, they can also be used to increase the stability of the drug. And one of these examples is actually with aspirin. And aspirin undergoes hydrolysis upon storage in water. And what was verified was that if we storage aspirin in eutectic solvent, we can actually make this hydrolysis go 8.2-fold slower in choline chloride propanediol. And so this increase in the stability was also verified for beta-lactamic antibiotics. Betaine was capable to improve the stability of imipenem and clavulanic acid in 7 and 2.5-fold when compared to water. And despite of having these results in the stability for beta-lactamic antibiotics, at least to the best of our knowledge, until this moment, there has never been reported the use of the eutectic solvents to increase the solubility of antibiotics. So we have explored this possibility in our recent research, and that's the examples that I bring today. Because after the discovery of beta-lactamic antibiotics, such as penicillins, they are used worldwide and they're very effective, but after the discovery, other classes of antibiotics, they have been found in literature, like chlorphenicol, the quinolone family. And despite of being effective in recent years, there's been a constant increase in the resistance to these antibiotics. And since they have to be clinical options, and in order to stay in the market and be effective, they are the ones that need a bigger improvement, because these antibiotics have low water solubility, a decreased susceptibility, and as I said, an increasing resistance. And so we have dedicated our research on this both classes. And in recent years, the rise in the multi-drug resistance bacteria has completely outpassed the discovery of novel antibiotics. So this led to a re-examination of some of the antibiotics that were abandoned in the past, which is the case of chlorphenicol, that can be also useful for now for treatments. And chlorphenicol is a very low water-soluble antibiotic. It's mostly used as a bacteriostatic agent and acts by inhibiting the protein synthesis of bacteria. It's active against both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, now with a more limited range. But its use has been mostly restricted to topical application, because oral administration and intravenous administration of this drug has been associated with unwanted side effects, such as bone marrow suppression. So it's mostly used at the moment for the treatment of eye and ear infections, and topically applied in the suture lines and skin grafts. So having this notion, we focused on the use of this antibiotic for the treatment of eye infections, more properly in using eye drops, And this type of formulations, the therapeutic efficacy is mostly limited not only by the drug's solubility, but also for their permeability through cornea and fast elimination to tears, which limited the maintenance of the concentration in the ocular environment. So these are the two main drawbacks we aim to tackle. And so we started by attempting to increase the solubility of the active ingredients. And started by, and our goal was to increase the solubility, but in aqueous media. So we studied a range of dipothetic solvent concentrations in aqueous solution, and we started with 2 dipothetic solvents, same hydrogen bond donors, but we altered the hydrogen bond acceptor to evaluate their influence in the drug solubilization ability. And for this, we started with 1:2 molar ratio. And as you can see, we have a monotonic increase in the solubility with a maximum at 90% of diprothetic solvent, which is corresponding to an increase of in 1 order of magnitude in the drug solubility. But we know from other studies that we do not need to work near the eutectic point to actually have better results. So we attempted other molar ratios from which the concentration of the components in aqueous solution is more what we want for the therapeutic purpose. And so we studied also the 1:2 molar ratio and compared to the previous results in 1:2. And as you see, the same trend is verified, but now at the maximum, we can increase the solubility by changing the ratio. And what happens is that we can increase the solubility not only by changing the dipothetic solvents components, but also by changing the ratio of the mixture. And so having these results, and here I present the results for the dipothetic solvent 1, what we are now trying to develop in collaboration with the Faculty of Pharmacy in the University of Porto is a thermoreversible system, a thermoresponsive system that can create a gel in the eye. So it will allow the more controlled release of the drug from the dipothetic solvent formulation and allow to improve the efficacy of the drug for the treatment of eye infections. And so based on this, this was our method for improving the therapeutic efficacy of chloramphenicol. Back to our search for more effective therapies, when we look again for the drawbacks associated with quinolone family, we have a bigger problem because quinolones, they are used worldwide in several treatments, in our daily treatments, and it can be a threat to the safety and efficacy of treatments if these active ingredients leave the market. So we focus a more profound research on attempting to improve the efficacy of the quinolone family by the proper design of the dipothetic solvent to this purpose. And once again, we started by attempting to increase the solubility of the active ingredients. And among the quinolone family, we can find fluoroquinolones, and fluoroquinolones are very used as antibacterials worldwide. They act by inhibiting the enzymes involved in bacterial replication, and they are, as I said, used in a variety of medical uses, from which urinary tract and skin structure infections are mostly applied. And despite they are active against several pathogens, I would like to highlight these two, E. coli and Pseudomonas aeruginosa, because they will appear later on this presentation. And so we started by the dipothetic solvent selection. And I'm not going to lie to the first, we were not very successful in increasing the solubility of this drug, because we attempted several combinations of hydrogen bond donors and acceptors, and they were not resulting for the purpose we have intended. So we looked again of what we knew and what was already in the literature and our therapeutic goal. And so we have selected the components based on what is already in the literature for a specific application and which components could be useful to increase the therapeutic action that we wanted. I cannot actually give much detail on these hypothetic solvents because we are at the moment in a process of patent pending for these hypothetic solvent formulations. But what we've seen while preparing these hypothetic solvents is that adjust the pH initially can be of utmost importance because you can have initially a eutectic mixture that is suitable both for oral and topical applications, but also because it is much easier to actually adjust the pH inside of the hypothetic solvent than when it is in an aqueous solution. And finally, because it will have a huge impact on your overall cytotoxicity. So to begin, we had 4 hypothetic solvents, but due to stability issues, we have to discard one of our mixtures. And so for the solubility studies, we started with this initial 3. And once again, our goal was to increase the solubility in aqueous media. So we studied different percentages of the hypothetic solvent at room and body's temperature. And as you can see, the hypothetic solvent 1, it's capable to increase the solubility, but the hypothetic solvent 3 actually has a higher ability of solubilize at 60% of the eutectic mixture. And these are good results to increase the solubility of the drug, but when we consider the results obtained for hypothetic solvent 2, we have a much greater impact on the solubilization ability. We have a remarkable increase in the solubility in 2 orders of magnitude for both temperatures. And when we consider the visual effect of what we have at 40% of the hypothetic solvent, as you see here, is the same amount of antibiotic in water and in our hypothetic solvent in aqueous solution. So this is even more outstanding when what we compare these results in what is reported in literature in recent years. So evaluating these profiles, what we're seeing is that the hypothetic solvents 1 and 2 have a non-monotonic solubility enhancement that is mostly compatible with the hydrotropic mechanism where the hypothetic solvent aggregates around the drug. And hypothetic solvent 3, it has a monotonic increase, which is more compatible to the co-solvency mechanism. And so we had this notion of we're capable to increase the solubility, but we wanted to know if by using these hypothetic solvents as alternative solvents, this would have impact on the drug's therapeutic action. And so we started by determining the minimum inhibitory concentration. And this is performed by dispensing bacterial inoculum in a 96 well plate with our drug and our formulations. It is incubated and you read the absorbance. And this minimum inhibitory concentration is relative to the minimum amount of drug that can have visible bacteria. So by the differences in the absorbance, you can determine the point of this concentration. And this is particularly relevant because we can have a decrease in antimicrobial activity or not. So we studied first this action in 2 bacteria, E. coli and Pseudomonas aeruginosa, 2 gram-negative bacteria as models because they're pathogenic. And as we can see, based on the comparison with the results obtained for the pure antibiotic, we actually maintain the antimicrobial activity. And in fact, when we consider the results for Pseudomonas, what we have is a decrease for half in the concentration needed of antibiotic when we combine it with hypothetic solvent 2 and 3. So we have this, this result for the MIC value, but we wanted to know the susceptibility of these both pathogens to the pure antibiotic and to our formulations. So what we did was an antibiogram. We do it by dispensing the drug discs in the medium plates. And so we tested 2 different concentrations for each bacteria. And our first fear was that the viscosity of the hypothetic solvents would actually affect the drug diffusion into the media. But the dilutions that have to be made for this kind of assay do not affect this. We can match and even increase the growth inhibition zones when compared to the pure antibiotic. And this are the results we have for E. coli. They're pretty much the same that we have for the pure antibiotic. But when we see the results obtained for Pseudomonas, we have a much interesting result. In fact, the pure hypothetic solvents, they have no action against this pathogen. The hypothetic solvent 1 is not very capable to increase the antimicrobial activity in both bacteria. But when we consider the hypothetic solvents 2 and 3 in combination with antibiotic, we have a higher growth inhibition activity. In fact, this is more visible at the MIC value. If we consider that we have the pure antibiotic at this concentration has no susceptibility against the pathogen. And when we consider hypothetic solvents 2 and 3 in combination with antibiotic, we have a notable increase in the response. So we know this, and this is medically relevant because it gives us an idea how to inactivate the bacteria. But for therapeutic purposes, when we want to inactivate this bacteria, we have to know the amount of drug needed, the amount of time to fully inactivate the bacteria. So we need to have a dose response profile. And that's what it did for both pathogens. And here are the results with E. coli. As you see, the pure hypothetic solvents are not very effective in decreasing the cellular variability. And the pure antibiotic and the hypothetic solvent 2 with antibiotic, they actually only are capable to decrease more pronouncedly the viability after 24 hours of incubation. So these are good results in the maintenance of the activity, but when we consider the results for Pseudomonas, we actually have a much interesting, once again, behavior. Because I call your attention for the orange line. Orange line is the pure antibiotic. And as you see, even after 24 hours of incubation, we don't have inactivation of the bacteria. In fact, it does not affect the viability. The pure hypothetic solvent itself, they have no much impact on this reduction. But when we combine, once again, the hypothetic solvents with the active ingredients, we have a remarkable effect on the inactivation, especially for the hypothetic solvent 2, that after 24 hours of incubation has a remarkable decrease in the bacterial viability. And so we knew that we could increase the therapeutic action. We had these amazing results, but we know that the overuse and the misuse of antibiotics in treatments, if one bacteria resists, it will multiply and it will give the rise of multi-drug resistance bacteria strains, which compromise all the treatments that we know. So we wanted to know if it would be safe to use hypothetic solvents in combination with antibiotic, if they will promote the mechanisms of resistance in bacteria. And as we can see, even after 5 cycles of exposure, we do not have an increase in the resistance. We actually maintain the overall viability. which allow us to say that these formulations that are now developing are actually safe to be used with antibiotics. But as I said before, we always have to evaluate overall cytotoxicity of formulations. So that's what we've done with ACAT cells. And these are cell lines for human keratinocytes. And so we evaluated the viability for the pure antibiotic, the diprotic solvents, and the diprotic solvent combination with antibiotic. And as we can see, these are not toxic for the cell lines within the range of concentrations that we are working with. So they have a higher efficacy, higher solubility, and they're not toxic for administration. So having this notion, we wanted to have a drug delivery system that could prevent the degradation of our formulations, but also allow the controlled release of the drug from the diprotic solvent. And to this purpose, we have considered the use of biopolymers. And biopolymers because they are biodegradable, biocompatible, and some of them can even have antibacterial activity. And as I always say, I think they must be highlighted over polymers because due to their similarity with biological macromolecules, they will reduce the stimulation and chronic inflammation or even immunological response. And so they will produce less toxicity in the host. And that's exactly what we want. So based on this, what we are now, what we considered was to combine these diprotic solvent formulations with biopolymers and study not only the drug release profiles, but also now in collaboration with Abel Salazar Biomedical Science Institute in the University of Porto, the bioavailability profiles in vivo models, if they are maintained, if they are altered by this type of formulations. And so I hope we think that soon I can also give you some information on this matter. And so as a final idea, I think the message is that, as you see, in diprotic solvents, they can be quite promising alternatives to improve not only the solubility in aqueous media at room and body temperature, but also to increase the therapeutic action, as it happens with antibiotics, but for all types of pharmaceutical classes. And this can be achieved by not only properly selecting the diprotic solvents components, but also the molar ratios and having an effective and safe formulation. And despite this is quite in the beginning, I think that the next years, the gather of the systematic knowledge needed will actually allow us to develop new and effective therapeutic options that can lead to improved therapeutic efficiency as the systems we see here. And so I would like to finish by first acknowledging my supervisors for the constant positive reinforcement, all my colleagues in the group, our collaborations inside the university in the biology departments and also in the University of Porto, all the funding sources, and of course, all of you for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And yeah, I hope the others might have been following this wonderful talk regarding using DES. So the session is for questions, and we have one from Prabha. Please go ahead.
Hi, ma'am. Hi, ma'am. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, ma'am, I just want to get specified on the selection part.
Yes.
Yeah, if you are selecting a diclofenac, say, how we select the DES pair? Like, some more light into that will be more interesting for us.
Diclofenac, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so diclofenac is an anti-inflammatory drug. So what I would do to select for anti-inflammatory drugs is actually it's an advantage because anti-inflammatory drugs, they are quite addressed in literature. So first, I would say that you have to see your therapeutic goal, because if you want or you aim to have a transdermal delivery, then if you use the combination of diclofenac with permeation enhancers, that would actually increase your permeation ability of the active ingredients. If you want to more oral administration, I think you can combine that with a dipyotic solvent that has in its combination something that increases the anti-inflammatory ability. And you have a lot of compounds that actually are capable to improve anti-inflammatory activity, which is very good for your application. So I think it mostly depends on which is your goal. If it's topical, transdermal delivery, oral, bioavailability, and then you just have to tune this dipyotic solvent selection.
Yeah, ma'am. One more thing. The viscosity of the dipyotic solvent is a barrier, no, to replace the conventional organic solvents or something with this drug delivery.
Yes, that's mostly why we have, for this purpose, actually aqueous solutions. Of course, that, for example, as I showed to, I think, is chloramphenicol. As you can see, I can do solubilities from 10 to 90% of the dipyotic solvent. But when you see for the fluoroquinolones, I can only do that until 60%, because the viscosity of the dipyotic solvent is so high above that limit that it doesn't allow to have uniform solubilization ability. So of course that for some dipyotic solvents you have quite a liquid form that you don't have that problem, but some of them can actually have a limitation in that part, that I think when we can have an aqueous solution, always have the dipyotic solvent above 40 to 50%, which can help mostly to decrease the viscosity.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the next participant, Professor Ankikatha Reddy, please go ahead with your question.
Okay. If you want to make any tablet, normally or medicine in the pharma industry, we use active pharmaceutical ingredient plus excipient, right? So I think what you wanted to say, probably your deep eutectic solvent is playing a role of excipient, or is it more than that?
In my case, I think, yes, you can say that it's a solvent. It can actually help as excipients, but you can also have the dipyotic solvent as the active ingredient itself. When you have the first approach, as I said, dipyotic solvents comprising active ingredients, and in that fact, only the second component can be, I think, considered as excipient, because the liquid form is the active ingredient itself. I don't know if I was clear.
Okay, but that means that that means the deep eutectic solvent is also having some kind of a therapeutic action.
Yes, but what we did is, if you noticed in all the essays for the fluoroquinolone family, is address the how do you say, the behavior of the dipyotic solvent itself. So as you've seen for all of them, the dipyotic solvent itself has no action. So you have a synergistic effect when you combine both. You can say that the dipyotic solvent itself has antimicrobial activity, because that's not verified. But when you combine the two, you have a synergistic effect, definitely.
Yeah, but that effect, that's why I'm not able to understand. So what actually it is, you said in one of your slides,
Yes.
the therapeutic value or therapeutic efficiency of API has increased because you added deep eutectic solvent component. So that
Yes.
means definitely is somehow making this API to go to the specific location, or maybe it is making API to work effectively in some mechanism. That mechanism is not clear. That is why my question.
Yes, okay. I understand your question. I have the same question. And actually, at the moment, I'm trying to have some results on that matter because we have an hypothesis, but it's not already proven. So I don't specify in the presentation, but it's actually one idea, but I cannot provide now further information on that matter. But the hypothetic solvent will have an impact on the bacteria that helps the drug to actually have more effects as in an overall idea.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. The next participant, Divya Dhingra, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, hi. Your talk was very informative. So my question is regarding the percentage of DS that you're using. Like you said, 40% of DS in aqueous solution, but we know that we can add up to a certain percentage of water in DS, and beyond that, the DS loses its identity. So like if 40% of percentage of DS you're using, then that means it's like having just the 2 components of DS dissolved in water.
Yes, that's actually a very good point. I've seen the more recent reports on that matter. Actually, firstly was addressed that upon 50% you have a total dissociation of the hypothetic solvents components. But more recently, it was verified, and I strongly believe on that after 20% of the hypothetic solvent, you have a more phased dissociation. So it's not complete dissociation of the hypothetic solvent after 50%. I believe that in 40% you still have a great part of the both components in the hypothetic solvent. But of course, from limits near 20% of the hypothetic solvent in water, of course, that the dissociation is almost complete. So this type of concentrations are more problematic. Then 40%, I wouldn't say so much.
So did you try your experiments by just adding the components in the water in your solution? Did you find similar results? Like, have you tried this thing? Just adding the 2 components of DS?
By doing that without the hypothetic solvent formation, just solubilize all the ingredients.
Just like you are taking certain amount of the 2 components and making DS first. So now I'm asking just to add directly to the aqueous solution, the 2 components in the fixed ratio.
Yes. We have assessed the solubility for the components separately in the same concentration they are in the hypothetic solvent formulation. We have assessed the concentration of the components in exactly as they are in the hypothetic solvent, but without the hypothetic solvent formation. And this behavior that is shown here, it can only be observed when you have the hypothetic solvent component, the hypothetic solvent formation, and then the solubilization in water, because there's a synergistic effect in the formation of the hypothetic solvent that actually justifies the use of this solvents in the formulation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions? Any other questions? Sachin, Prabha, you want to ask? Please go ahead. Okay, I think, you have already asked. Okay. If there is no other question, I have one question, Sonia.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. My question is, what is the release kinetics? I understand that I cannot ask you what is the DES1 and DES2, whether it is.
Yes.
But is the API within the DES moiety, or is it hydrophobic DES or hydrophilic DES? Because the way it is released in our body depends upon the pH. So like on the pH, like you have a pH in the lower part around 1.5, very acidic pH. While as you go down, it becomes, increasing the pH. So where do you want to, how the release kinetics takes place? How does it go?
To actually respond your question is that I can guarantee you that the pH has been controlled in this assays. So it is always the same pH for all of them. And the dipothetic solvents, they are hydrophilic. That's why we can have this these dipothetic solvent solutions in aqueous media. So the solution, actually solubilization ability is almost instantaneous for actually dipothetic solvent 2. The one that has a lowest ability and takes more time, the kinetics is more slow, is for dipothetic solvent 1. I don't know, it interferes in the solubilization ability, but for most of them, it is almost instantaneous.
Okay.
But if you want to know, these solubility assays, they are performed in 72 hours. We do it under 72 hours to guarantee that we have reached equilibrium and we have the full solubility.
Okay. Okay. So yeah. So okay. And if there are no more other questions, then we would like to give you a round of applause for the wonderful presentation. And your Professor Mara is here. Is he here?
I think so.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very
I'm
much.
here.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was wonderful hearing about your work, and hope to carry on this further. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity and for the amazing work that you are doing with this workshop.
Oh, thank you, Mara. Yeah, thank you, Mara. Yeah, sure. I hope we will have more such workshops in future. Okay, thanks, Mara, and thanks, Sonia.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So we go to the last talk. Although it is a scheduled break for 15